Hello, how are you doing? I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader, and the long list for the International Booker Prize has just been announced. And this is really exciting because, as you may know, I like to follow a lot of book prizes, and I think the International Booker Prize is my favorite prize to follow, or at least last year this was the prize list that I found most interesting and enjoyable to read as a whole. I'd some strong opinions about what was declared the winner, but like with all book prizes, it doesn't really matter, I think, so much which book wins, or at least to me it doesn't matter so much, because I just enjoy the process of reading all the books and engaging in all the discussion around them in the process leading up to the winner being announced. And there were so many books on the long list last year. I think I read almost all of the entire long list, but there were so many of them that were really engaging and dynamic in how they looked at different subject matter and story. And so it introduced me to all these exciting new authors who I hadn't read before. So I thought it was wonderful to follow. So there are 13 books on this year's long list. They're all here, and so I'm going to go through them individually, giving short summaries of each book and sort of my thoughts and feelings about them, how interested or not I am in reading these individual books. Personally, I've only read 3 of these books, and quite interestingly, one of them was one of my favorite books last year. I've talked about it a number of times. I thought it was so amazing. Another one of these books I really didn't like, and so I'll get into that, and I have some strong feelings about that. And then another, the third book, I have only just read, and I thought was so exciting and fascinating, and so yeah, I'll talk about that as well. But looking at the list as a whole, I mean, it does have a sort of Euro-centric focus to the list. As in most years, most of the books are from European countries. I mean, there are books on this list from China and Chile and Argentina and Kenya and Palestine, but the rest are from European countries, and I'm not really sure why that is, why it's always so European focused. I mean, maybe I'm sort of guessing that because this is an English prize, and in England, I think the majority of the translated fiction that's published here is from European countries. So that probably just naturally means that the submissions are more likely to be from European countries. But there is a good mixture. And what I'd say overall, though, is the really exciting thing about this list is that it really mixes form and genre in the different books. So you have novels and some collections of short stories, but they're books that really blend genre and form. So you get a sort of mixture of fiction and essay and travelogue and memoir and history and poetry, and so it like mixes them all together. There's a science fiction book in here as well. So it's a really exciting mixture of form, and I'm someone that's really interested in form, the form of books and how they tell the story, and how it doesn't necessarily need to be limited to a novel, but can sort of expand out to use these different elements in storytelling to present their subject matter in a unique way, and so yeah, that's just sort of my feeling overall. But now I'm going to get into each of the individual books. So just so you can look out for this, the shortlist for the International Booker Prize this year will be announced on April 22nd, and then the winner will be announced on June 2nd. So we can sort of look out for those dates. I know the shortlist announcement is coming quite soon. It's quite a big ask if you want to read the entire long list before the shortlist is announced. But I think I will try to read most of these books. But yeah, I'll get into each of them now. I Live in the Slums by Kan Shua, and translated from the Chinese by Karen Gernant and Chen Zeping. So these are short stories which look at the modern landscape of China, and it's the author's first collection of short stories for quite a while. I think she's a very well-established author. In fact, Susan Sontag said of her, if China has one possibility of a Nobel laureate, it is Kan Shua. So yeah, I've never read her before, but I've heard that her fiction doesn't rely so much on characterization or plot, but more follows the voices and the psychology of her characters to tell deeper stories about the immediacy of their reality, but also looking at larger philosophical questions. And I think that sounds so intriguing, and I have heard that her fiction is quite difficult to read. It's not sort of just easy reading, but it is very rewarding. At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop, and it's translated from the French by Anna Mocscovakis. So this is a historical novel about two Senegalese soldiers that are fighting for France against Germany, and it's about the madness of war and friendship, and I've heard such amazing things about this novel. The author Viet Tan Nguyen says it's an unrelenting take on war, race, masculinity, and colonialism, a visceral dramatization of how our humanity and inhumanity are forever intertwined. The Pearfield by Nana Ekvtimishvili, quite a complicated surname, and it's translated from the Georgian by Elizabeth Heighway. So it's quite exciting that for 2 years in a row, there are novels about the country of Georgia on the long list. So last year, The Eighth Life was also on the long list, and this was one of my favorite books that I read last year. I think it is so extraordinary. Now, this novel is quite a lot shorter for people who are intimidated by big books. This novel, I think, is only about 160 or so pages long. So it's about a teenage girl who's 18 years old, and she goes to a residential school for intellectually disabled children. And there she experiences a lot of violence and neglect. So she is really determined to leave and go out and make a new life for herself. But also a boy she meets at this school, she wants to help him get out of this school and this terrible situation. So yeah, it sounds like quite a dramatic story, and it takes place after the revolution in Georgia that led to its independence. So yeah, I'm very curious and excited to read this novel. The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Mariana Enriquez, and translated from the Spanish by Megan McDowell. These are short stories looking at murder and family betrayals and morbid desires in modern-day Buenos Aires. They're also described as sort of contemporary Gothic short stories. The author Lisa McNerney, who's a former winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction, calls this a weird and wonderful exploration of contemporary horror, cities falling apart, society turning on itself, the loneliness of the internet age. But more than that, these stories are fun, wild, triggering, sinister, button-pushing fun. I think that sounds so fascinating. This book is just being published on April 1st here in the UK, so it's sort of perfect timing that this long list is coming out. And also the translator, Megan McDowell, she's translated authors like Alejandro Zambra and Samantha Schweblin, who's also been listed for the Booker International Prize before. So, has translated lots of quality South American fiction. So yeah, I'm so looking forward to reading these. When We Cease to Understand the World by Benjamin Labatut, and it's translated from the Spanish by Adrian Nathan West. These are stories of the lives of mathematicians and scientists such as Fritz Haber, Alexander Grothendieck, Werner Heisenberg, Erwin Schrödinger, and looks at how they have strokes of genius in their work and really pushing forward ideas, but how through their mania and real focus on these subjects alienate their friends and lovers and descend into perilous states of loneliness. And I've heard such amazing things about this book. There's a lot of speculation around around book prizes and a lot of some of the guesses of what would be on the long list for this year's Booker Prize. This book was listed in a number of people's lists and speculations about that. So yeah, and this has been a much lauded book, and I'm just really excited to read it. The Perfect Nine by Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and it's translated from the Gikuyu by the author himself. This is looking at the mythology surrounding the origin stories of the Gikuyu people in Kenya, and it does this in verse form. So the story goes that a couple escaped war and famine to make a new home for themselves at the base of Mount Kenya, and there they had many daughters who they married off to many different suitors, and the generations which resulted from these different marriages became the Gikuyu people of Kenya, and these daughters are described as the perfect nine in this mythology. So it blends this folklore and allegory to form this new story about the history of these people. And Ngugi is obviously a much lauded author. He's been previously listed for the International Booker Prize. Like before the prize just awarded single books, it used to award authors for a body of work, and Ngugi was listed for that prize before. But he's also been tipped for the Nobel Prize before, and he's had a long, very respected career and written many novels and memoirs, and yeah, so I'm really looking forward to reading this. The Employees by Olga Ravn, and it's translated from the Danish by Martin Aitken. This is subtitled A Workplace Novel of the 22nd Century because this is a science fiction story about a spaceship called the 6000 Ship that's inhabited by humans and humanoids, which are robots that look very much like humans, and they discover a planet that has a valley on it containing lots of curious objects that they bring on board to study and have interactions with them. And they find through their scrutiny of these objects, they have different reactions to them which are sensual or intellectual, or stir different memories and feelings in them that make them question the boundary between being human and being a robot and fulfilling a function aboard this ship. And the novel is composed through a series of interviews with these humans and humanoids. So you get their different testimonies and statements about their interactions with these objects, but also it follows a plot of what is happening on this ship and the changes that are occurring on this ship over time. And yeah, it's quite dramatic, but also really fascinating. I read it this past weekend, and I thought it was so interesting and enjoyable how it approaches this story. I mean, I've gotten into reading more science fiction in the past year, and this is the best kind of science fiction, I think, that's really intellectual and philosophical, but also really imaginative. And so it reminded me somewhat of the classic novel Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. It's on that sort of level, but does something quite new and I think really exciting in the form of how it tells this story. Summer Brother by Jaap Robin, and it's translated from the Dutch by David Doherty. So this is about a 13-year-old boy named Brian who lives in a trailer with his divorced and uncaring father, and he has a brother that is severely physically and mentally disabled that's lived in an institution for many years. And when this institution is undergoing renovations, the brother is sent back to live with Brian and his father over the course of the summer. And but the father basically just like leaves them alone with each other. So this 13-year-old boy is left caring for this very challenged brother of his, and he has to care for him and try to communicate with him, and even though he doesn't understand his disabilities. So yeah, it sounds like a very heartbreaking story story, but also a very powerful one. An Inventory of Losses by Judith Shalansky, and it's translated from the German by Jackie Smith. These are stories about things which have been permanently lost to us, like it looks at a tropical island and the Caspian tiger and Greta Garbo's Fading Beauty, and it sort of queries what these permanent losses mean to us as a culture and a people today. So I'm sort of curious about whether this is actually fiction or not. Like on the back of the book, it is classified as fiction and travel and history. But yeah, it sort of sounds more like essays to me, and it's writing that's likened to the work of W.G. Sebald and Joan Didion and Rebecca Solnit. So it sounds sort of on a tone and level with that sort of writing. But I'm sort of curious to see where the fiction comes into it and where the stories, sort of imaginatively combine to form a bigger story, or if it'll in fact do that. But I am really curious to read it and see what this author is like. Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, and it's translated from the Arabic by Elizabeth Jacquet. This is the story of a Palestinian woman who is raped and murdered by Israeli soldiers in the desert in 1949. And many years later, another Palestinian woman is researching this and comes across a reference to this woman and what happened to her, but it's only a very small reference in a much larger article. And so she sets out on a quest to find out what actually happened to this woman and physically travels to the place where she believes this occurred. And how she does that and how it follows her heartrending journey is so powerful. And I thought this novel was incredible. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year, even though it's a very short book. What it actually says and the way it's structured and told is so artful as well, that I think it just, the message of it is so incredible. What it says about history and the people who are lost and forgotten in history and who writes history. And I find those questions really meaningful. And how it goes about telling this story, I think is so incredible. This has been a much lauded book already. It won the English Pen Award. And also I think it was listed for the National Book Award in America for translated fiction. So yeah, I'm so glad that this has got a lot of award attention, because I just think it's an incredible book. And though it's a very serious subject matter, I would highly recommend this book. In Memory of Memory by Maria Stepanova, and it's translated from the Russian by Sasha Dugdale. So this is the second book on the list from Fitzcarraldo Editions that published their books in these solid colors of either blue or white. And this is the story of how when the author's aunt dies, she goes to her apartment, and there she finds many faded photographs and old journals and lots of souvenirs and memorabilia from her life. And this is the story of her going through all of these objects, and through them she discovers the story of the past century of Russia and how a Jewish family managed to survive all of the oppression through that time. So yeah, it sounds like a really powerful story, and one that's creatively told through a mixture of sort of historical documents, but also memoir and essay. And so it's a story that really blends all of these different forms of writing to tell a unique story all its own. And I think it is the largest book on this long list. I think it's around 500 pages long of quite dense text throughout it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading this. Wretchedness by Andre Tichy, and translated from the Swedish by Nicola Smalley. So this is the story of a man named Malmo who's a successful cellist, and one day he meets a spun-out junkie, and through this connection he realizes that this very easily could have been his life. So it follows him as he travels travels to a number of European cities and contemplates his past and memories and how he came to be the person he is. And this is filtered through his avant-garde music. So this sounds like a very powerful story. I find this question so poignant of alternate lives and how we got to be the person we are, and how that's usually through a lot of chance and coincidence. And also, I'm very excited to see Nicola Smalley nominated for this award, because she's a publicist for And Other Stories. That's a great publisher that publishes so many exciting and interesting books. And I've met her before. She's just such a lovely person. And so I'm just so excited to see her nominated for this award. But also, I'm really interested to read this book because, like I said, it sounds so powerful. And finally, there is The War of the Poor by Eric Villard, translated from the French by Mark Polizzotti. This is about a fascinating 16th century figure named Thomas Munzer that was quite a radical in the time, that he spoke out against both the Roman Catholic Church and Martin Luther, and so was really criticizing both of those religious thoughts and divisions in the church, and to really persecute the church for failing the poor continuously, and seeing how they, like, both of these systems of thought were really consolidating power and wealth for themselves, and it was really doing a disservice to the lower classes. And this is a fascinating figure, like I said, but the way this story is written, I thought was so disappointing, because it, I've been talking about how I think it's so interesting how these books combine these different forms of writing, and I think this is a combination of a biography and history and social commentary and I guess a bit of fiction. But to me, it's so slight. This book is only just like a little over 50. Yeah, it's like 65 pages long. And basically, to me, it feels like an extended Wikipedia entry. I mean, really, like, the figure that it talks about is fascinating, but the information it gives, I don't think is more than you would get from reading a Wikipedia entry. And I'm really a bit baffled, because there's been a lot of this author is really critically praised. There have been reviews of this specific book which have really praised it, and I just don't really get it. I mean, it just didn't come across to me. It felt too slight. I would love to read a much longer book about this figure, but yeah, just to me, it felt really disappointing. So yeah, I don't want to end on a bad note, but yeah, I just think with prize lists, sometimes the books are personally successful to you, and sometimes they're not, and this just didn't really work for me. But like I said, a lot of other people have really appreciated and enjoyed it, so I would really like to hear other people's perspectives about this. So those are the 13 books on the list. Quite a varied lot. And also, just looking at the titles, like I Live in the Slums, The War of the Poor, Wretchedness, it's not the cheeriest subject matter, but like I said, I think these are some of the most exciting books that are coming out today. And it's a prize list that I do enjoy following so much, and I find really rewarding and exciting to follow. So I'm really looking forward to reading a number of these books. I don't know which one I'm going to get to first. Maybe The Dangers of Smoking in Bed or Wretchedness. Those might be the ones that I read first, but like I said, I'm really interested in reading a lot of these. So let me know if you've read any of these books yourself so far, or which you're interested in reading yourself, which you're most excited about or willing to give a try, and we can have a chat in the comments below. But yeah, it'll be really exciting to follow the award this year and see which books are shortlisted and which one wins and all of that, but also, yeah, just following all the discussion around it. So thank you for watching, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.